Hello and a huge welcome back to the PDHPE and CAFS podcast. What we're going to be uncovering today are really simple strategies for you to implement in your classroom for your marking to make life so much easier. So we're going to unpack 5 really simple and practical strategies for you to streamline your marking. And it doesn't matter if it's your junior marking, even your primary school marking, if you're in a primary school, your CAFS, your PDHPE, and your soon-to-be health and movement science marking. Today, I'm going to share with you 5 very simple tips to make life so much easier, because at the time of recording, we are in the midst of trials for our HSC. Many schools do them in term 3. I think it's the most ideal time. Otherwise, you're very pushed for content. I have heard a lot of schools trying to fly through content, and then they spend the majority of term 3 doing revision. 10 weeks of revision is going to put lots of pressure on your kids. They're going to get over it. Rather than embedding revision as you go, I think the most ideal position is for our trials to be in like week 4 to 6, not in term 2, because you still essentially have over 10 weeks with the kids, and they're going to tune out. They're going to switch off. So you're going to have like 10 weeks of post-trial blues. So that is my ideal kind of position in the year, to have them in week 3, term 3 of our year, and then week 4 to 6. Okay, let's unpack the very first strategy. So the first one is for you to, after the kids have sat their exam or sat their assessment task, or their submissions have come in, it's really important that you make sure the kids have, put their numbers and everything on correctly. All that admin stuff needs to make sure it happens there and then. I know there's been lots of times sitting in schools, especially when I was working at the senior campus, we had 5 CAFS classes, 5 in year 11, 5 in year 12. Same with PE, 5 in year 11, 5 in year 12. We had hundreds and hundreds of kids' responses. And if the kids didn't put their student number on it, it made it very hard to then work out who was what at the end. It just makes so much sense to have all of that admin sorted before you kind of go to marking. So the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to print off your marking guidelines in an A5 version rather than a big A4, or rather than not giving it to them at all. The kids need to have a copy of the marking guidelines. And at this point, I'm not an environmentalist, but I'm very conscious of recycling and reusing and reducing what I use. You have to print it off. The kids have to visually see it in their, with their exam or with their assessment, so they know how they've gone. They need to be able to engage with that marking guideline. So printing it off in A5 version. And what I've recommended to schools before is to actually print it off in a colour. And that colour can be associated maybe with the colours that you use in your classroom to help kind of, get the kids to kind of be aware of certain cores or options. But printing off each of the marking guidelines in a coloured paper in A5. Your print lady, your admin, they might get a bit cranky, but that's okay. That's okay. That's their job, is to make your life easier by printing off and doing your copying for you. So the first one is to print it off into A5. So if it's like research methodology for CAFS might be in yellow, core 1 for PDHPE might be in purple. The options are in different colours, just to streamline that process when you actually come to mark. So that's the first one. In line with that, when you get the kids' responses, and say if you're sitting at your marking desk or at home somewhere, on the floor, wherever it might be, you're doing your marking, I would probably suggest for you to actually staple those marking guidelines like all at once. So if you've got like 30 kids' responses, staple. Okay, I'm going to now, have a read and mark question 22 and 23. So you kind of have that, all that admin, that fiddly stuff that happens, you kind of do it there and then. So the first one is printing off their marking guidelines in coloured paper in A5 version. That way the kids can visually see how they've gone. You can then write on that in terms of the mark they've been awarded. You can then give them feedback on that. And then obviously when you're going through that paper or that assessment task later on, you can then give direct feedback. They can see it. They can engage with that marking guidelines and obviously question and ask you, different things about that. Okay, strategy number 2 to streamline your marking is to kind of similar to what I said in terms of the collating or the admin stuff. Make sure you have your cores are separated out from your options, from your multiple choice. It just means that, say, if you've got a casual teacher or someone helping out for the day, they might help you with your multiple choice. That's very quick and easy. The old school, like print off the overhead and then put it over the kid's response and then do the tick, tick, cross, cross, whatever it might be. Very simple, straightforward way to do your marking. Obviously at HSC marking, it is entered in the system. The system then picks up what little bubbles have been coloured in, and it makes life so much easier. You can, get anyone in your faculty or anyone in your group, your teaching group, to help mark the multiple choice. Now you can then obviously separate your cores. That makes it a lot easier when, if you've got a faculty of say 5 teachers, you might get 2 people to focus on the option and the other 3 teachers might give feedback to the kids in terms of the cores. Whatever it might be, you're just separating the exam out so it makes your life easier when you go to mark. So separating your paper out into cores and to options. When you get to the options section, what I'd really recommend for you to do in your wide reading time, which is strategy 3, I'd actually recommend you guys do like a high, middle and low. That's a really great strategy for juniors and for primary school kids, is to have a look at how the kids have engaged or responded, to then kind of get that, to get that overall perspective or, view of how your cohort, how your class, how your kids have gone. And then you can kind of adjust from there. I just like to separate it into the high, middle and low bundles to make your life so much easier when you go to mark, to streamline that process. So number 2, we'll separate the paper out. And of course you will go, if it's for the trial, multiple choice, short answer and extended response, or multiple choice, short answer and the options, whatever you're working with. Of course, when we enter the health and movement science realm next year for the very first time, the exam specification that has been provided on the NESA website is very similar to what happens in the HSC right now. So 20 multiple choice, a whole heap of short answers, and then 2 extended responses at the end. Rather than like what we have now, we have 2 cores that the kids actually tackle. We have 2 extended responses that the kids tackle. So very similar kind of approach, just, obviously with it's still all core for the whole paper. Okay. Number 3 is to do wide reading. And what wide reading does, and what it is, it enables you as a marker to get an idea of how your kids have responded and how they have engaged with paper. Because sometimes they misinterpret a question, sometimes they're way off, and you might need to tweak and modify your marking guidelines accordingly. So this replicates the HSC process at HSC marking. So as senior markers and as a SOM, for me, I would have come in as the supervisor of marking and assigned my senior markers different parts of the paper, and they would have started to kind of get their head around how the kids have responded and how they've engaged in relation to the marking guidelines. Because remember, the marking guidelines and the exam paper have been developed by the exam committee at HSC level or different organisations. So for example, the Learning Network, for me, we brought out our PDHPE and CAFS trial and Year 11 exams. If you want to have access to those, head to thelearnnet.com/resources. They're great for revision. Like we have ones from CAFS for the last 4 years. We have a couple of PE ones, so you can kind of use those for revision. But when you're wide reading, you're getting that feel of how the kids have responded according to the marking guidelines that were developed by the person who actually developed the exam. So, of course, they had in their idea of what that might have looked like. Then what you can do at marking level is then adjust and tweak the marking guidelines so you have more of a spread of marks across the cohort. Like if you are sitting there looking at your responses and thinking, hang on, if I keep the marking guidelines how it is, then some of our kids, a lot of our kids would maybe get a 0 or a 1, but they've interpreted the question different to what the exam committee have intended. If you tweak that marking guidelines, it opens that up to then for the kids to be able to be awarded for what they've actually written. So the third step is about doing that wide reading. What that wide reading also does is it enables you as a marker to work out what those benchmarks are that you're looking for your mark ranges. So, for me, when I did marking, 16 years of CAFS HSC marking. For 5 of those years, I was a supervisor of marking, which is like head HSC marker in New South Wales. For certain questions, for mark worth, if it was like a 4 marker, usually early on in the paper, I would say to my senior markers, okay, we're looking for one script, maybe a 3 out of 4, so your markers can see this is what a typical 3 looks like. So when you get to your responses and you start reading and marking, you can kind of go, okay, well, I'm looking for that. If it's less than that, it's going to be a 2. If it's 1 point, it's 1. If it's more than that, it's a 4. So those benchmarks enable your markers, either at HSC level or replicated at school level, to have that cohort-wide standard as to what you're looking for. It's a really great strategy to take on into schools. And if you're marking maybe across networks or you're marking with people in your area or swapping school marks, you can actually sit down and have that perspective of looking for those benchmarks and coming up with that benchmark. If it's an 8 marker in either PDHPE or CAFS, you might be looking for like a 5 out of 8, a 7 out of 8, a 3 out of 8. So when you're doing your marking, you can go back to your marking kit, and that's a word that we use at HSC marking. A marking kit is like a selection of responses that replicate what those mark ranges are. So a 3, okay, the senior marker will say, this is what a 3 looks like in our marking. This is what a 5 looks like. This is what a 7 looks like. And when you're doing your marking, you can go back to that cohort-wide standard, or at HSC marking, it's the statewide standard, and then compare that particular response that you're marking at that point to that standard. So your wide reading and your benchmarks a really awesome opportunity to sit back and engage with how the kids have responded, tweak the marking guidelines accordingly, and then make judgments based on your cohort-wide standard, or at HSC marking, you would know it as a statewide standard. So that's a really simple way and really effective way for you to do your marking and make those judgments on how the kids have responded. In terms of then awarding that mark, that's a whole nother conversation. And look, even this Friday, I have the pleasure of going to a school in Sydney, and we're doing some CAFS marking. So I can obviously come out to your school, whether it be HMS or PDH, only for the next 2 years, or CAFS, and we can engage with that. We can, do some marking together, some trial marking together. Okay, strategy number 4 to streamline your marking is to just focus on 1 or 2 questions at a time. There is no point in getting your head around 5 different questions across your paper and then marking like from the start of a student's response all the way through to the end and going, okay, what was that like? What was I looking for the 21 or for the 25? If you mark, say, like if it's a spread, like if 21 and 22 are together, I would mark that together. So I'd go 21, 22, have a look at the marking guidelines, look at your benchmarks. How has this particular student responded or engaged with a question? Okay, what's their mark? Give them the mark, give them feedback, all that sort of stuff. And then go to the next one. Okay, 22. how has this particular student responded to the question, and then make that judgment, give them the mark, give them feedback, etc. And then kind of get to the next student's paper and then mark 21 and 22 again, and then continue on through that paper. If you're solo or if there's a very small number of you marking. If you have a bigger cohort, like I said, when I worked in Sydney for 14 years, we built the course up from 1 class to 4 classes by the time I left 14 years later. And then when I moved to the Central Coast, I worked at a comprehensive senior school. So we had 5 CAFS, 5 PDHPE classes in both Year 11 and Year 12. We had lots of marking. We had probably about 5 to 6 teachers marking CAFS and PDHPE. So it was really important for us to kind of go, well, you can't do all of it. Okay, you guys mark the option. You guys mark question 21 to 24 of the short answers, and kind of divvy the paper up that way. There is a bit of, admin that has to, and negotiating that has to happen across your faculty, but it makes life so much easier rather than someone just kind of, chopping and changing and going from 21 to 28 and then going to another student's response. It just makes life so much easier when you're actually just focusing on that 1 or 2 question. Obviously, if you're doing the option, just focusing on the option, doing A first, doing B, doing C, that's for CAFS. And then, for PDHPE, whatever option you're doing, just focusing on that and then moving on later on with your marking. Okay, number 5 is a really great strategy, and I came across this, I don't know, probably about 10 years ago, and I loved it. So Shirley Clark is a really awesome educator. Her books are amazing. She's got lots of books about feedback and formative assessment. Feedback tends to be her thing that she's recognised as, and she has this strategy called Tickled Pink. And I was like, I love that idea, because she was giving feedback in pink rather than giving feedback in red. Red is synonymous with, stop, don't keep doing that. Like, enough's enough kind of thing. Alarm bells. So when our kids have red all over their paper, it doesn't matter if it's positive comments in red or areas for improvement in red. The kids see it as like a bit of an alert and see it as negative. So, obviously there's lots of research out there about red and the color red and using that for feedback. Shirley Clark then came up with the idea of tickled pink and using pink for positive instead of, red. So I started to adapt that. And so I started to use like a pink pen when I was giving my kids feedback rather than red. So I ditched all the red pens out of my pencil case and out of my drawer at school, and I started to use pink. And the kids loved the pink for lots of reasons. Pink is really bright and happy. I taught an all-girls school for 14 years, and I taught mainly girls at the senior campus, a few boys here and there for PE, and a couple of boys for CAFS in my second cohort through. But the pink was really great. It was really effective because the kids could see, okay, all the stuff that Miss has written in pink is actually positive. It's positive feedback for me to keep doing what I'm doing. So the positive was in pink. And then I kind of adapted Shirley Clark's strategy because I didn't really like the word tickled pink. It was just a bit weird. So I now call it pink for positive and green for growth. I've been using this strategy probably for the best part of, 12 or so years. So kids' comments from me as the teacher are in pink. That's what they've done well. And green is areas for improvement, green for growth. And so if you see my marking, and when I do this on Friday, I'm going to be asking our teachers to use pink for positive and green for growth. These are really simple strategies for you to use as a busy teacher, but it also has really big benefits on for the kids. So instead of seeing red all over their page, they see the pink. What they've done well is in pink. What they need to do to improve is in green. And that's a quick visual for you to actually use that to then, give the kids feedback on how they've gone. So very simple, straightforward strategies for you to adopt. as a busy PDHPE, CAFS and health and movement science teacher. And of course, all the things I'm sharing with you now are straightforward and can be used for HMS when we start to unpack it and start to market next year. So let's quickly uncover our 5 very simple ways to streamline your marking. Number 1 was printing off the marking guidelines in A4 sheets, preferably in colour. If you don't have colour at your school, just buy some coloured paper, get school to reimburse you. Number 2 was about separating your paper out, making sure those admin tasks are sorted. The kids have their student number on it or their name on it if it's for the junior years, and making sure you separate into the cause or our focus areas for health and movement science next year, and our options for CAFS. So making sure, again, just streamlining what you're doing. Number 3 is about doing wide reading to then get benchmarks on how the kids have gone to develop that cohort-wide standard or that class standard. Or, at HSC marking, it's called our statewide standard. You're looking for what standard am I expecting for that particular mark, of how the kids have responded. Number 4 was focus on 1 or 2 questions at a time. You're going to get overwhelmed. You're going to have all this marking, all these ideas, marking guidelines and what the kids have done and what they've read in the examples. Is that an example, or have they embedded wellbeing here? Is that an appropriate sporting example to include? It gets really confusing. Just focus on marking 1 or 2 questions at a time. You'll develop confidence over time for that, and you'll feel like really good about yourself because you have built that confidence to then, mark your kids' responses accordingly. And the last one was my pink for positive, so my pink pen. So I use a felt tip pen. Of course, if you want to grab some cheapies just from Kmart, really simple little pens, but pink for positive. So anything the kids have done in pink is anything they've done well is in pink. So you might circle something, you might underline their syllabus content and understanding. You might say, great example, like this is really good, or show the kids where they've, what they've done well in their response. And then green for growth, so things that they could do to tweak. So you might say, like, put a little comment and say, more of, maybe a bit more of an impact here. Or you might say, do you have another example? Or e.g. example, like, question mark. The kids deserve that feedback. In 2 podcast episodes time, I'm going to do a whole episode around the kids engaging in their feedback, because we spend so much time giving them feedback. Often they don't actually, use it. So they're my 5 very simple, straightforward ways to streamline your marking. It doesn't matter if you're marking kids in primary school, your junior 7 to 10 PE, or your CAFS, PDHPE and HMS students. Hopefully these are going to streamline what you do. And of course, these are all strategies that we go deeper in inside our membership. So we are in the midst of HMS at the time of recording. It's August 2024. We are about to embark on our very first experience and cohort through for health and movement science next year in 2025. We have our K-10 PDHPE syllabus knocking at our door. CAFS isn't there yet, but it is a super busy time for us as PE and CAFS teachers across New South Wales. So we have a number of memberships which are now open. So we have our K-10 PDHPE membership, which is like literally everything you need to teach K-10 PDHPE, with our scope and sequences, our units of work, our programs, step by step of the way in terms of, YouTube links and resources and done for you ideas and some content. We are rolling out a whole new phase of K-10 PDHPE resources. Of course, we have our CAFS Collective Masterclass. Yes, the Masterclass is coming with it. Our CAFS Collective membership, which is 4 years strong this year, and our Health and Movement Science membership, which is, for many of you coming to an end. And if you'd like to rejoin us, you can head to thelearnet.com/memberships to check out the 3 levels of membership. And if you are in a school that's like, Kel, I want to be part of all 3, just let us know and we can work out a way to support you across that. But it's a really exciting time for PDHPE, and don't get too far ahead of yourself. I know at some point, in the last couple of weeks, I'm like, okay, do this. For me as a leader to help you guys save your precious time, energy, and your well-being to make life easier. But don't get too far ahead of yourself. Know that we have your back. We have so many resources that are coming out that are going to save you a whole heap of time. So good luck with your marking. I'd love to hear how you go, especially your trial marking. If you want to experiment with anything that I've shared with you today, come over to Instagram and tell me how you have engaged with that. So kellybell.coach is my Instagram handle. Let us know what what you tackled or what you tried out. Or if you have a great strategy to share with other teachers, of course, I'd love to celebrate that too. So happy marking. Let me know if you get stuck. And of course, I can come out to your school and we can do some marking together for PDHPE and CAFS this year. And of course, health and movement science next year for year 11. But have the most wonderful week and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.